Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baron Durop. Fate Core, published in 2003 by Evil Hat, is a setting-neutral role-playing game designed to turn the aspects of narrative roleplay into mechanical aspects of the game. If that sounds weird, you're right. It is weird. And that weirdness is what makes Fate Core one of my favorite RPGs so elegant. Yet despite their clear expertise in developing the game system, the designers apparently put minimal thought into its commercial delivery. Everything in the marketing, right down to its explanation of the rules, looks like an unapproachable piece of literature totally devoid of self-awareness. Opening the book reveals how out of touch the game system authors are from the RPG community writ large. Its core concepts, while slim and elegant, are quite nuanced and extremely divergent from just about every other RPG system on the market. In a world where rule sets like 5th edition D&D are understood to be normal, Fate Core fails abysmally to acknowledge its own oddity. While Fate Core is one of the best RPG systems on the market, publishers have done so few favors to the typical RPG player that most people would rather just pass it by. A marketing department has succeeded when the brand becomes the thing. Searching the web is Googling, blowing your nose is using a Kleenex, and playing a role-playing game is playing D&D. D&D is ubiquitous, yet somehow Fate Core missed the memo. As an illustration of D&D's gaming culture effects, Dungeon Masters regularly try to hack 5th edition D&D into something it's not at all designed to do because they're frustrated with how the game's tone feels. Yet many of these DMs don't understand that they don't need hit points, levels, and challenge ratings to have an effective game system. To these players, those mechanics, the HP and spell levels, are like air. They believe they are implicitly a requirement. Entire YouTube channels have sprung up as a result of this frustration. YouTubers like Dungeon Coach have hours of content attempting to homebrew 5th edition D&D into a different game. Moreover, a quick trip to any given RPG subreddit and you can find tons of people dissatisfied with 5e who are senselessly attempting to hack in some other kind of tone. Furthermore, you can also inundate yourself with Dungeon Masters who, upon being introduced to a new RPG system, try to do a lift and shift conversion of everything that makes D&D the tightly wound, epic, adventure hero fantasy game that it is. They try to take the classes, levels, and spells with them as if they're accidentally missing from the newly introduced system. Fate Core does nothing to acknowledge this behavior and explain why it's completely counterintuitive to the game's design. Fate might have been the solution these players were looking for all along, but the designers have done nothing whatsoever to illustrate why. If D&D is the elephant in the room, then GURPS is the woolly mammoth. Back in the 80s and 90s, people thought that GURPS, or Generic Universal Roleplay System, was the bee's knees. This now dated game system allows players to pick up any number of supplement books like Imperial Rome or Y2K, combine their rules together, and play in a unique game setting. Until Fate Core came along, GURPS had been the de facto multi-purpose gaming system. Its popularity was so pervasive, the original Fallout video game was designed and programmed using GURPS. It was only replaced with the special system right before launch due to licensing issues. However, as GURPS has aged and more modern RPGs have been published, GURPS's overt crunchiness tarnished its own popularity. This is where Fate Core really shines. The notion of needing a handful of super dense supplemental rulebooks to successfully run a game in GURPS is entirely compressed to a 15-minute discussion between the players at the start of a Fate Core campaign. Do the players want Republic Rome on the brink of civil war? Cool. It's an aspect. Do they want a Y2K doomsday apocalypse where machines can no longer count? Awesome. Now that's an aspect too. Those aspects in-game can be invoked to help reinforce the game's narrative. In essence, they become the foundation of the story and the game's mechanics. So why, oh why, would the publishers of Fate Core also create tons and tons of GURPS-like supplements? Except they aren't. They're worse. Published on Evil Hat's website is an extremely comprehensive list of Fate worlds, some 50 or so modules, each roughly 50 pages long, detailing a game world with niche mechanics, each one looking like 2 random GURPS supplements were poured from a blender. Granted, it's unfair to call each Fate world worse than any single GURPS supplement when stood separately from each other, but if the Fate worlds are observed as a whole, there is one Fate world module that is painfully missing. A standard issue, Dark Age fantasy world with verbose guidelines on how to manage spellcasting, how to create magic items, and how to do combat in Dungeons with Dragons. By contrast, the most common way new 5th edition Dungeon Masters are taught to run a game is to use the D&D starter kit. Everything in that kit leans into an assumed understanding of a typical fantasy world. The kit trusts that a new DM has a working knowledge that dragons, necromancers, and goblins are all bad news, and proceeds to teach them how to play D&D under those assumptions. Fate Core completely fails at this. Unlike GURPS, which gave players separate books about monsters, dragons, and spellcasting, Fate Core only provides extremely niche, esoteric supplements. From pop-singing cyber DJs to high school fantasy melodrama, or even alternative history Cold War prisons, there's a lot of weirdness there. This isn't to say these game world supplements and their corresponding mechanics aren't interesting. They are, but a just-initiated Fate Game Master coming from D&D who's looking for a comfortable place to start is utterly abandoned. There is no easy starting place. One of the most common complaints D&D players will share when first introduced to Fate Core is, "I don't know what my character can do." The book's answer to this statement is accurate, but unhelpful. You can do anything you want. Much like how some anime nerds may explain the details of a Shinto ritual with no deep cultural understanding of why each aspect of that ritual is important, the rules of Fate Core poorly explain its deeply nuanced mechanics. Turn here, bow there, roll dice over here, and make aspects over there. But why does one bow, or why does one make aspects? The rules are lacking in this explanation. These aspects are what drive both the game's narrative and the game's mechanics. Without the use of aspects, a character fails to build mechanical advantage and thematic tone. What the rules poorly explain is that the narrative is used as a tool to grant mechanical benefit to the characters. Additionally, these new players generally miss the fact that they should create aspects too, not just the game master. Human fighters coming from D&D are spoiled by just mindlessly rolling to hit in combat, but that same human fighter in a game of Fate Core combating an evil wizard in his library will likely die a quick death. Instead, this brute will need to create and use aspects that build narrative toward their own mechanical success. The bookshelves in the library? Knock them over and create a books piled everywhere aspect. Further invoke that aspect to trap the wizard under that book pile. Simply attacking the wizard outright will surely lead to the character's demise. Therefore, this is the thesis statement of Fate Core. The less potent the character's narrative, the less likely the character is to succeed. But this thesis is never verbosely explained in a way that new players can understand it. So, Evil Hat. Fate Core could be a lot more accessible. For an organization that seems to pride itself on its accessibility-based branding, Fate Core's rules do very little to initiate new players. How do we use magic? How do we fight dragons? How do we get lost in the dungeons of your game system? Show us why we don't need hit points, levels, and classes to tell a good story. Your game is one of the best RPGs on the market, but if D&D players who are looking for something different never understand Fate Core's mechanics, they'll never play it. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.